Frances Mariotti is an extremely talented cellist and inventor of the two-bow technique. She has collaborated with many well-established musicians across the globe and is well known for pushing musical boundaries. She works closely with the Kilo Music School in Thimphu through the Bhutan Music Foundation. The foundation supports musical education and activities in Bhutan and also promotes Bhutanese music abroad. Kuzuzangbo, and welcome to Talking Matters. Frances, I wanted to ask you how your musical journey actually began.
Oh, my Lord. It began with my father. My father was an amateur violinist, and he used to play with my aunt, who was an amateur pianist, but a fabulous pianist. And my earliest memory of music is of the Beethoven Spring Sonata, played by these two. And it was so moving. I remember my mother coming into my room, and I must have been about 3, because I remember which house it was in. And I was weeping, and she couldn't understand it. And it was the music, of course. But she thought there was something wrong, and I was sad or something. But it's that other kind of weeping when you're very happy, when something just moves you and touches you. And to this day, that piece is very, very special to me.
But it was almost automatic, this musical sensibility. It was inborn actually for you.
For me, I think it was. It's hard for me to judge and all that, but I think it was.
But playing the cello then, how did you gravitate towards this musical instrument?
I wanted to play an instrument with the bow. And my father played the violin. My sister was an amateur violinist. So, of course, I wanted to play the violin. And he said, no, let's get you a cello so we can play trios. So that was fine as long as it had the bow. I was fine with that.
But did you ever think you'd be such a path breaker, such a pioneer when it came to playing the cello? Of course, you developed the double bow technique.
Yeah.
And there was nobody before you who did that. And was there nobody who stopped you and says, no, Frances, you can't do that?
Well, no. Your first question, did I ever imagine this? No. I've had a very, very wonderful, strange journey. I wouldn't trade it for anything. I've done everything I've wanted to do so far, with a million projects ahead of me still. But no, all the experimentation, everything I've done on that side has come from a need, a musical need. For example, the double bow technique, which is playing with 2 bows in one hand so that I can access more harmony at once, 3, 4 parts harmony, which you can't do with 1 bow. And that developed because I was improvising. And I first started improvising with a lot of people, and then I started improvising alone. And I just needed more harmony. So it came out of a really specific need. So I invented a way around a solution. So that's kind of the genesis of all the things.
And none of your contemporaries were critical of that?
I, first of all, kept it quite quiet until I could really, really master it, because I didn't want it to be seen as a trick. Mm-hmm. And no, it's been received incredibly well, because it is so beautiful. I mean, 1 cello is beautiful. If you can expand a cello, it's just more warmth, it's 2 is better. I'm greedy. So, no. My colleagues like it. So,
what is it that you enjoy doing more? Because you've pretty much given master classes at all the music conservatories in Europe, yeah. And you've been invited in the States, and you've lectured. But what do you enjoy more? Sharing what you know already, or composing music?
Oh, composing is pretty unbeatable. It's just so exciting to get ideas. It's when those neurons flash off and you have a new idea you've never thought about before, and it's possible and it will work in sound. That is so exciting. So, I mean, all the rest of it, I love it, but it's all very different. You're working with people or master classes with composers. It's just different. my favorite is making my own music.
Meeting you, I look at music as a science now. I mean, of course, I've read upon it, but I'm meeting you in the flesh and blood, and you actually say that. Yes, actually, if you look at music, because when we talk about music, we're usually talking about very free-spirited people, very living with abandon. But then for you, what is really important is discipline.
It's both. I think without discipline, you can't really master anything. And though all the rockers won't admit it, Lou Reed spent his time practicing. You know, they all did, the really good ones. Jimi Hendrix, you bet, they practiced. They maybe found something on stage that was, as I say, the genesis of an idea that they later developed and which became a voice. But those people work very hard. They party very hard, but they work very hard, just like classical musicians. And of course, traditional folk musicians have the same incredible complexity that we do. It's just that our music is Western and yours is Bhutanese, or it could be rock music or Indian classical violin. It's all the same. It's this wonderful art form that's very, very deep and can really sustain a lot of practicing before you reach mastery.
And also with music, you were talking about how it has this feel-good factor. At the same time, I mean, contributes, of course, to positive living and thinking.
Yeah, well, I think music is something very strange. We don't quite understand why it moves us so much. But almost everyone is touched by music, a certain kind of music, and everyone will have their own tastes, of course, but that's hard to analyze. It's like saying, why do you fall in love? It's the same kind of thing. Something touches you, and for no reason, you could be sitting in your living room listening to a piece of music, and all of a sudden you're flooded with tears, because something in the music did that to you. And it didn't have to be the storyline. It could even be an instrumental piece without words, and it touches you to the point that you're weeping and you don't understand why. It's just a human communication that's very profound on a wordless level. It goes beyond words, and it's so instant and so nuanced. So, yeah, music is, in that sense, very free, and in another sense, to attain any mastery, of course, it requires huge discipline and quite a scientific rigor to master it.
One of your favorite examples about how music can actually help you persevere and reach a certain goal. You like using the example of this year's Nobel laureate in physics.
Yes, that's true, that's true. When he won the prize, someone asked him, what was the thing that influenced you most in your life? And he answered it was his bassoon teacher in high school that taught him to persevere, to practice until he got it right, until it was perfect, never give up. And that, of course, taught him discipline to keep at it every day, you don't miss a day. And discipline and concentration, because without kind of this super hyper concentration, you can't become a master in music.
This is a very strong argument for actually having music as part of your academics, as your academic curriculum, instead of just an extracurricular activity.
I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. And not just because I'm a musician, but there are many studies showing that music changes the structure of the brain. It actually releases chemicals. It releases dopamine when you have a pleasurable experience from music. And dopamine, we know, is that neurotransmitter which always is released when we feel good. So if you're enjoying a wonderful meal, or you're with your boyfriend, or you're listening to a piece of music, or you see a beautiful landscape, all of those wonderful peak experiences, there's a rush of dopamine, and music does that too. And they've just been able to measure that recently, and especially with the fMRI machines where they put you in a tunnel and can measure the activity in certain regions of the brain. Now they can really absolutely quantify what is being stimulated and what the effect of that is, just by thinking about music.
Music, people say, is of course a universal language. You don't really have to understand the language that it is in. I mean, not just instrumental music, but even if you're singing it, the way it appeals to people across geographical boundaries. Is that a reason why you came to Bhutan? Why Bhutan Music Foundation started up, and your association with the Kilo Music School?
Yeah, not exactly. I came to Bhutan by chance. It's the only tourist trip I've ever taken in my life. I always go for my work. I travel all over for my work. But this was my tourist trip, and I went with my sister and some other friends. It was my first trip, and I fell in love with it. And I couldn't figure out why. Of course, it's gorgeous. But the people, there's something in the people that are so special, traveling through the land, and the whole Buddhist culture, the richness of the culture here, the richness of the art, the richness of the music, and this wonderful religious tradition that you have. It's just so unique. It's so unique. So I came back. And again, the same thing, because I kind of thought, well, I've seen it, I'll be bored. No, it was worse. It was worse. And then I thought, well, if I come back to Bhutan, I'd like to have a project so I can really get to know people and not just be looking through the glass. You know, really, really work with people. That's the best way to get to know people. And so Kilo and I discovered each other, and I started Bhutan Music Foundation in the Netherlands, which is a foundation which would like to support musics of every sort, especially traditional music in Bhutan. We've begun with Kilo Music School because that's where my expertise is in Western music, but we eventually want to expand that and include more of the musical culture in Bhutan.
So what you're looking at is actually collaborations with local artists.
That would be wonderful. Also in the visual arts. We want to just be a platform. And at the moment, we're an educational platform. We gave 20 scholarships to kids who couldn't afford to come to Kilo, since it's a tuition school. We'd like to bring another piano. We already have 2 upright pianos, which is absolutely unheard of in Bhutan.
Right.
In one school, plus very, very good electronic pianos. Not the kind that play the instant things, but real instruments that have a touch. So the kids get a feel of what a real instrument is, which is so important.
As a musician though, for you now personally, when you have the scientific discoveries that actually validate the fact that music can be so positive, I mean, do you want people just to look at music in that sense, or what is music to you? Does it go beyond that?
Oh, for me, of course, it's a language of the heart. It's a language of instantaneous nuance and feeling and subtlety, and it's quite similar in a way to when you look at these wonderful mandalas that are extremely complex. And for example, some of the works of Bach, which are the most complex harmonically and contrapuntally, that's quite similar because you have all these different voices, you have that amount of detail, and you have to be aware of it, the whole structure. While you're building it in time, you're aware of what happened before, what happened in the end, to hold it together in time. So that's kind of a very magical mental state to be in. And I imagine that it must have something to do in the musical side with what the monks do when they picture these mandalas in their mind. That kind of a complexity, and they can recreate that, and I'm sure that changes their whole well-being.
You talk about creation, and it's not just creation of music for you. You've been called an inventor. Forget the double bow technique, which you're famous for. You're actually even working on the technical bits of building cellos, actually. You've done that.
Well, I've built bows, certainly for the 2-bow technique. I've developed new systems of bows, and I developed an electronic cello that has no sound. It's a digital cello, and it has no sound of its own. It's totally a trigger, so to speak, for a computer and it can run films, it can run music and vision together.
How did you conceive of such an idea? It's beautiful.
It was a moment of pure insanity. I was at the University of California in Berkeley, and we developed a system for my electric cello, which is a plain old, ugly electric instrument with 6 strings that I helped design, but I wanted to have something wherein I could accompany myself with computer background. So that was my first instrument 10 years ago. And I thought then, I don't like to play the instrument, then go to the computer to drop another program. You lose the audience, you lose the whole continuity. I thought, why can't I have a system where I have 6 strings and I'm playing and I press a button, and that changes the computer? So we invented that at the University of California. We made a whole sensor system that was ergonomically placed on the instrument, so it was absolutely seamless. I could play and never have to interrupt. And so instead of just pressing down a note, I press down a program, so I get a different background, a different orchestra, or whatever. So we did that, but it was kind of a prototype, and all this stuff was jerry-rigged and pasted on and the rest. So the next year when I went back, I looked up the boys, and I said, why don't we just incorporate this inside the instrument? And they said, no, it's such a nice instrument. And I said, no, it's so ugly. No, it's so nice. Let's make a new one. So I said, okay, if we make a new one, I don't want any sound. And they were very surprised because an electric sound is not very beautiful. An acoustic sound has a body, and it's resonating on wood, and you're dealing with horsehair on the bow, so it's all natural, and it has that kind of warmth. But an electric instrument is just cables and electricity, and when you press on it, you're actually pressing on a microphone. It's a pretty ugly sound, which is great for rock bands, but it's not good for some other more delicate, nuanced things. So I said, I would love an instrument with no sound that just triggers all these wonderful programs and pre-recorded sounds that I could make with real instruments and triggers visuals on a big scale. So we invented this thing that is so powerful and has so many readings per millisecond of sound. So it's always saying, basically what it does is this, it says, has anything changed? And it does that 1,000 milliseconds.
Wow.
So it's very, very, very powerful. So if I give it any kind of a command, it can take it, it can handle it.
How long did it take for you to develop that then?
That took 5 years.
I can imagine.
It took 5 years.
Wow.
With 2 different teams, University of California, and then my boys in The Hague.
Oh wow.
We rebuilt it and redid it.
This is such a great example of how you can keep up with the changing times and technology and actually use it to your advantage.
Yeah.
Because of course there's always the argument that digital technology is going to overtake what you usually do. You had the example of something acoustic, something natural, something human. Do you see digital technology in music actually overpowering the traditional conventional notion of music?
No, never, never. Already, I mean, we hear in all the movies and television clips that they use a lot of synthetic strings, you know, that you get out of a piano keyboard, but they're so fake. And we've listened to that and tolerated it for so long. Now people are starting to get sick of it and want real violins and real humans. You know, people who make a little bit of a mistake because that mistake is so interesting. You know, the little variations between human beings when you play, everyone tries to play the same thing. It's always different, so it adds an enormous complexity that you cannot get with electronics. So electronics are fun. They might serve as a model for something, but then get humans to play it. They'll do it 100,000 times better.
Right. It can only last so much, and the appeal lasts only so much as well.
Yeah.
You know, when I talk to musicians like yourself, so well established, so knowledgeable, get a little intimidated, and I wonder, will I ever play like you? Would I ever have the ability? Like when we began the interview, you were talking about how you had this inborn music sensibility. You were anyway sensitive from such a young age. But what about people like me who've maybe played musical instruments about a couple of hours in their lifetime, which I can count on my fingers, and you've pretty much played music your entire life, almost all the hours in your 24 hours. So what if you start late? I mean, does practice really make you perfect in music no matter how late you start in life?
It's an excellent question. And it, again, is going to lead me into my appeal to foster music at a young age. Because there's a window of time when you're young that we don't have as adults for language, for music. Certain windows tend to start to close, or it's like pulling a curtain over them. And you might see the light through the curtain, but it's more difficult.
I see. But then it's not impossible.
Not by any means. So that was my first pitch. If your kid wants to play music, oh, please support it. It will help him in medicine. It will help him in mathematics, in teamwork, in discipline, in learning how to concentrate. All of that is enhanced, which is kind of a counter thing to all the screen addiction we have today. Because you have to really, really focus. And of course, the screen makes us crazy with Twitter and Facebook and the rest. And that's the last thing we do is focus. We always want the next thing,
Right.
you know. So in any case, that's for the kids. But for adults, yes, pick up the instrument. You can learn it to a proficiency that will give you great joy. Maybe you won't become a master, you know, but it doesn't matter. You can express things that you couldn't in words, with a subtlety, with a spontaneity. And we want to develop a whole curriculum for Kilu School and kind of wed them to a European conservatory.
Right. And you actually formalize the learning experience then when you do that.
It makes it easier for the kids if the teachers change every year,
Right.
because they'll be on the same track, the same repertoire. They'll be able to take the exams, qualified exams. So that's really important for them.
That's very good news. Francis, thank you so much for speaking to us today. It's been really enlightening and wonderful.
Thank you so much.